only photos. The defence has got they have all the photos taken during my investigation in their possession, my lady.
But there must be a forensic docket.
There is a case file. We do have case files in the laboratory.
Could you make that available?
I can make it available if it's an issue, but as I said, my notes and my recollections of the investigation are all in the photographs, my lady.
And I tell you why we request that from you, because I think it's not in dispute that you gave a report, and what is not in the report is that the accused must have or was on his stumps when he hit the door with the cricket bat. That's not in your report.
My lady, as I said earlier in my evidence in chief, was that by the time that I did the investigation on the door, the only request to me was to determine if there were any marks on the door that related to the cricket bat. I was not requested to determine the state or whether Mr. Pistorius was wearing his prosthesis or not. And that is why it's not in my report. And I've said that explicitly during my evidence in chief.
But that's not what it's all about. We know one thing. Well, you're at the forensics department. When you have additional information and you have a report, you bring out a second report. My lady,
as I said in my evidence in chief, during the consultation, I think it was in November, the first consultation with Mr. Nell regarding my report, I just mentioned it to him as a side note that my observation is that Mr. Pistorius was not on his legs, he was on his stumps when the door was hit, not knowing that it was an issue. And then Mr. Nell pointed out to me that that there's a discrepancy with his statement, as in the statement in the bail hearing, apparently Mr. Pistorius said that he was on his prosthesis when he hit the door.
But then you go, because now you know it is important. Then you do a report so that that report can be filed in the docket, that is no surprises, and say, well, I have since seen this, and I think in all fairness, let's disclose this and make a second report available. Why was that not done?
My lady, by that time my case file was already closed and finished on the system at the laboratory. I did disclose, or I did discuss it with Mr. Nell, and as far as I know, he did disclose it to the defence. So for me to go and make another report was actually not necessary.
It is shortly before the trial, in a late submission of a further particulars to say the accused was on his stumps. That's what the state will say. No report. Let's see, when did you come to this finding? That according to you, he must have been on his stumps when he hit the door of the cricket bat. When was that?
My lady, as I said several times now, when I did the inspection on the door on the 30th of April last year, I did notice that the marks were low, and I did mention the measurement of my shoulder height, matching the angle of the bat as it was deducted from the marks on the door. So I was, in my mind, already confident on the 30th of April last year that Mr. Pistorius was not on his prosthesis. With that said, it was not an issue at that stage. It was never an issue for me. It was never something that I had to put in a report, because by that time Mr. Mangena also spoke to me and confirmed to me that Mr. Pistorius was not on his stumps when he fired the shots. So it was not an issue for me. It was basically confirming what Mr. Mangena said at that stage. I was only in November of 2013 was I informed that there was allegations that Mr. Pistorius was not on his stumps when he hit the door.
Why then not the report?
As I said, my lady, I did inform the prosecutor in the case about it in an informal discussion, and I left it in his hands, my lady.
But what I'm trying to understand, it is for the first time in one sentence disclosed in February 2014. I'm trying to find out now with that knowledge, and insofar as you're correct, with that knowledge, November, December and January and a part of February, you're from the forensics department, go back to your forensic docket, open it and do a report.
My lady, I did inform the prosecution about that. I couldn't see another reason why I must physically go and write a report. Our 212 statements serves as a ways of presenting evidence in court. It doesn't mean it has to be a 212 statement on all of our findings. So at that stage, I was happy that I did inform the relevant people and the necessary people about what I found there, and that's why I didn't write the report.
You understand, of course, that there's one purpose to disclose the contents of the docket to the accused, and that is to inform him about a case for him not to be ambushed. That part you understand? I understand that absolutely, my lady. Now, did you feel satisfied that the information going in the docket was not dealing with your views that the accused was, according to you, on his stumps when he hit the door with the cricket bat?
That's a very long sentence.
I'm sorry, can I break that up?
Yes.
I'll be glad. Thank you, my lady.
Were you satisfied that it was fair just to have your 212 statement not dealing with the fact that the accused, according to you, was on his stumps when he hit the door?
I was happy because I relate the message to the point where all the information is going to, and from where the necessary information would be distributed again, my lady.
Now, my understanding is that you did the test on the 30th of April 2012.
That is when I inspected the door and the cricket bat, my lady.
And where was that done?
That was done at the ballistic section at the Forensic Science Laboratory, my lady.
What you did not do, you did not go back to the house, get permission, and fix the door into the frame.
My lady, that was not necessary to do that, because we had the height of the door when we were there on the 8th of March for the scene. All the measurements were taken, so I knew exactly how high the door was from the floor and how high the marks were from the floor. So when we put up the door there at the ballistic section on the 30th of April, it was not necessary for me to go back to the house, my lady.
What was the door standing against on the 30th to keep it up straight?
On the 30th, my lady, it was standing up against one of the cabinets at the ballistic section.
What kept it up straight and not leaning? Because I looked at photos and it appeared that it was leaning slightly against the cabinet.
It was indeed leaning slightly, my lady, but the angle of the door leaning slightly was not such that it would have influenced any of my investigations. I did take that into account when I did the investigations, my lady.
The hit of the door, that's basically also a trajectory. The movement of the bat, that's a trajectory. It's not a firearm, a bullet trajectory, but it's the cricket bat trajectory.
It's a movement in the direction, yes, my lady.
It's a trajectory that you must determine to see if it could match with the mark on the door. We're all first talking about the first mark. It's basically a trajectory that you must follow.
My lady, the investigation that I did, I had a mark on the door and I had a cricket bat, and I had to determine in what position that bat was. Doesn't matter what the trajectory was before it contacted with the door. I had to determine the mark on the door, in what position the bat had to be to cause that mark.
Well, if it was a firearm, let me understand. Would it have made a difference if the door was angled?
If it was a firearm, my lady, depending on the dimension of the target through which the bullet went, that could have influenced the finding slightly. But as I said, this is not a firearm. I had a mark on the door, and I had to match the bat with a mark on the door. The angle, whether it was 1 degree or 2 degrees, would not have made a major impact. In fact, if the door was like this, and the bat was from this side, if the door was standing exactly perpendicular to the floor, the handle of the bat would even be lower than, although very slightly, it would have been lower than what it was with that very slight angle, my lady.
Now, what positions did you take in when you determined the matching of the mark, the first mark? What body positions?
Initially, I just used the bat, and I tried to figure out how the bat could have been used to cause those marks, and then I eventually discovered that the bat must have been in that one position, and after I did the analysis on the second hole, it was only then that I kind of crouched down to try and see what the normal position or the expected position would be of the person wielding the bat.
What is this expected position? What did you take into account to determine the expected position?
The expected position, my lady, I took that as the reasonable position for someone hitting a door. You can imagine if a tall person has to hit that thing, he will be in a kind of an unnatural position. And if we just think about our normal actions, we will usually unconsciously be in a natural position when we do any actions. I'm not standing on my knees when I'm doing the dishes. That's not a usual position to do the dishes, if I can explain it that way. To be very extreme now.
I wanted to say maybe when you're scared of your wife, you can do it in that way. I want Mr. Kruger, with the leave of the court, my lady, to go to the door. It's just the candidate attorney, not to get the witness to move away from the door, just to assist in the demonstration.
Yes.
Thank you, my lady. And if you would kindly hand him the bat. I would first want him to stand up straight and put the bat matching in a position. Just put it in the matching position. You're welcome to go closer and then to inspect and to see if it matches.
My lady, I can see it from here, doesn't match. It's very easy to look at the distance and try and simulate the position. But if you're welcome to come down, and you will see that if the bat was in that position, the corner of the bat, of the backside of the bat, would have made a very distinct mark in the door. Whereas the mark that he's referring to now is a more flat surface with the bat, which corresponds with the side of the bat. And if it was in this position like he's holding it now, then the mark would have been different, my lady.
Just go to the door, if the ladyship will allow you, and see if it is on the mark. Put it till you're satisfied that's on the mark. You surely, are you suggesting that he hit the door with a flat bat? You can go back.
My lady, I did not say he hit it with a flat bat. We must maybe just get the definition of a flat bat correctly. But what I said was that the side of the bat is also flat, and the mark on that door corresponds with the side of the bat, the flat side of the bat, not as what he had it there, where the bat was at a very acute angle or a big angle, which would have caused a much sharper mark in the door.
Well, if you would not mind to go now and show us when you hit the door, you can just stop short, how you would get the bat in a flat position. And then we'll go to the second position. Stand right here.
In a flat position, I would
on the side,
like
I mean.
Okay, this is not a flat, it's a side-on position, I would.
The side-on position.
You wanted me to?
Yes.
To do?
Just don't break the door, please. Just go close. You can hit it. Go lower now. Stand a little bit back. No, you don't have to bend your knees. Just stand a little bit back and use your back. Put it now on the mark. What is it that you say?
I say I'm in an unnatural position at the moment, my lady.
Is it unnatural to you? Just do that
unnatural
again.
Position because I have to reach out
Would you go back and bring your body forward and tell me what's unnatural? What is unnatural about that?
Mr. Pistorius would not be able to reach this much further.
Why not?
Because, my lady...
Can you go back to the microphone? Why not?
My lady, as I said, and you must realize that my finding was not just under one mark. My finding was based on both marks. And if you look at both marks, there's very distinct marks on the side of the bat, together with a physical match that gave me the angle of the bat.
Well, let's take it step by step. Go back to that position that you say is unnatural, and I'm sorry that I don't see it, but go back and now compare it with the mark in that position.
My lady,
and tell us what the mark will show.
I'm of the opinion if we do the investigation in isolation, that we will be able to skew the findings at the end. So that is why I said it's important to look at the total investigation, to look at all the factors that was taken into account when I made my findings.
What do you mean that it's possible to skew the investigation?
My lady, what I meant with that was that if you just look at things in isolation and do not take into account the other factors, then one might get to, on specific things, might get into onto a different finding. And that's why it's important for me to also show the marks on the second shot to substantiate my findings.
But please do it. Can I just go back to this? I'm so sorry, Colonel. The first mark you could do by hitting the door, but you say that's in isolation. You could replicate the mark, but you say that was in isolation.
That's not what I said, my lady. I just said we must be careful not to look at different things and argue it in isolation. Then we might skew the findings.
Let's just go back. Before you go back to the door, on your demonstration, we could explain the first mark. I understand in isolation, but we could explain it in a standing up position. Okay. Not so?
That's correct, my lady. And there's maybe another mark that, and I must confess, I saw it this morning as well, which further confirms my finding.
Let's go to the second mark then.
I do not know whether it's allowable now to also indicate to the defence the second mark on this, which will confirm my finding on the first.
Tell us about the second mark, and then we'll do the test on both scenarios.
My lady, I would like to indicate to the defence there on the side of the bat here. There's a very distinct red mark which also corresponds with the edge of the door here. If the bat was used to hit it like that, which is a further confirmation. And I must confess that I discovered this morning when I took the bat out of the evidence sealing bag. Excuse me. And I think it's important that the defence have a look at that to just accustom themselves with that mark as well.
Just show us how that mark could only be caused to the bat. If you stand on your knees, to show how that mark could only be caused in that position.
On my knees or on my on a lifted position.
On a lifted position on your knees. What is it? You can go back and say what you demonstrate.
My lady, what I demonstrated just now was the mark that I found on the door actually fitted very well with the side of the toe of the bat.
Now go back and hit it in a standing position.
And you want me to hit it in the same position?
Yes. What do you say? That's not in your report.
My lady, as I said earlier in my evidence in chief, was that by the time that I did the investigation on the door, the only request to me was to determine if there were any marks on the door that related to the cricket bat. I was not requested to determine the state or whether Mr. Pistorius was wearing his prosthesis or not. And that is why it's not in my report. And I've said that explicitly during my evidence in chief.
But that's not what it's all about. We know one thing. While you're at the forensics department.
As in the statement in the bail hearing, apparently Mr. Pistorius said that he was on his prosthesis when he hit the door.
But then you go, because now you know it is important. Then you do a report so that that report can be filed in the docket, that is no surprises, and say, well, I have since seen this, and I think in all fairness, let's disclose this and make a second report available. Why was that not done?
My lady, by that time my case file was already closed and finished on the system at the laboratory. I did discuss it with my only photos. The defence has got they have all the photos taken during my investigation in their possession, my lady.
But there must be a forensic docket.
There is a case file. We do have case files in the laboratory.
Could you make that available?
I can make it available if it's an issue, but as I said, my notes and my recollections of the investigation are all in the photographs, my lady.
I tell you why we request that from you, because I think it's not in dispute that you gave a report, and what is not in the report is that the accused must have or was on his stumps when he hit the door with the cricket bat.
Mr. Nell, and as far as I know, he did disclose it to the defence. So for me to go and make another report was actually not necessary.
It is shortly before the trial, in a late submission of a further particulars to say the accused was on his stumps. That's what the state will say. No report. Let's see, when did you come to this finding? That according to you, he must have been on his stumps when he hit the door with the cricket bat. When was that?
My lady, as I said several times now, when I did the inspection on the door,
when you have additional information and you have a report, you bring out a second report.
My lady, as I said in my evidence in chief, during the consultation, I think it was in November, the first consultation with Mr. Nell regarding my report, I just mentioned it to him as a side note that my observation is that Mr. Pistorius was not on his legs, he was on his stumps when the door was hit, not knowing that it was an issue. And then Mr. Nell pointed out to me that that there's a discrepancy with his statement.